My stepson told me I'm nobody and had no right to tell him what to do, so when college tuition was due, I told him to ask his real dad. Hey everyone. Before we kick off today's video, I've got a favor to ask. We've noticed our channel isn't getting as much love lately, and subscribing is one of the easiest ways you can help us out. It's quick, free, and it means we can keep bringing you awesome content. Your support really means a lot, so let's work together to keep this channel growing. Thanks a bunch. Now, let's dive into the video. I never imagined I'd end up sharing this story, but I feel like I need to get it off my chest. I'm Robert, 45 years old, and I own a pretty successful top-tier wine bar in town, which I built from the ground up. I'm super proud of it. About 5 years ago, the bar brought someone special into my life. Well, at least that's what I thought back then. Her name was Melissa, and she was the bookkeeper I hired to handle the business's finances. She was smart, efficient, and had this quiet elegance about her that just pulled me in. Not only was she great at her job, but she also had this warmth that made late nights of financial reports much less of a drag. Initially, we kept things strictly professional. She was the newbie, and I didn't want to cross any lines. But as time went on, I found myself hanging around her office more often, coming up with random reasons to check in on her, just so I could spend time near her. Eventually, I made the first move. "Let me take you to dinner," I said one evening after we wrapped up going through the books. She paused for a moment and then smiled, asking, "Are you asking as my boss or as a man?" I replied, "As a man." That first dinner led to another and then another, and soon enough, we were talking about a future together. Everything seemed perfect. Melissa was attentive, and her son, Ethan, was polite and well-behaved. I felt like I had finally found the family I always dreamed of. After a year of dating, we tied the knot, and Melissa and Ethan moved into my place. At first, things were going great, and I dove headfirst into being the best stepdad I could be. I took Ethan to sports games, helped him with school projects, and tried to give him everything he needed. I paid for family vacations, bought him the coolest sneakers, and aimed to give him the kind of life I wished I had at his age. He visited his dad occasionally, which admittedly made me uneasy, given the past. From what I knew, Kevin had nearly burned down their old place multiple times while drunk, which is why he lost custody to begin with. But Melissa insisted it was important for Ethan to keep that connection since Kevin had reportedly gotten sober. She'd remind me, he's still his father. Ethan needs to know his dad cares. Although, during a school event when I saw Kevin, he didn't seem sober to me. There was something off about the way he wobbled while standing and how his eyes struggled to focus. Still, I kept quiet. Who was I to interfere? I was just the stepdad, right? If only I knew then what I know now. It turns out my eagerness to be the perfect stepfather might have blinded me from what was really happening, but hindsight is 20/20, isn't it? And the real trouble hadn't even started yet, not by a long shot. Time flew by, and suddenly Ethan's 18th birthday was on the horizon, along with his graduation. He was a nervous wreck around the house, constantly worrying, what if something goes wrong? What if people don't show up? What if it's not perfect? One night, I found him spiraling and put a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Hey, it's all good," I told him. "I've got a great idea. Why don't we host your party at the bar? We can reserve the best spot." He lit up instantly, already reaching for his phone. "Really? Oh wow, my Instagram's gonna blow up. Everyone at school is going to be so jealous." So, I threw myself into planning, wanting everything to be just perfect for him. I even took him shopping for a designer suit, a sleek black number that made him look like a young business pro. He looked sharp and confident, and I nodded my approval. One evening, as we were hashing out the details, I asked, "How many guests do you plan to invite?" Fiddling with his phone, he hesitated for a second. "About 30 people." "Great. Can you send me a guest list so we can make sure there's enough space and food for everyone?" He replied, "Oh, I don't really have one yet. Just plan for 30, okay?" Looking back, I wish I'd pressed him for the list, but I was so caught up in making the event special. On the big day, the tables were set, the lighting was warm and inviting, and my wine bar was transformed into the perfect venue for an 18-year-old's party. It was sophisticated yet fun, offering a cool menu of virgin cocktails and hors d'oeuvres. Ethan rocked his tailored black suit, laughing and snapping pictures with his friends. Melissa's family was there too, mingling and enjoying the night. So, there we were, chilling with a bunch of classmates, and everything seemed to be going smoothly. Then Kevin walked in, and I knew it was him even before he said a word. He was kind of wobbling with each step, his eyes all glossy, definitely drunk. "I'm here to wish my son a happy birthday," he shouted, grabbing everyone's attention. I was sitting next to Ethan when his dad came stumbling up to us, glaring at me like I'd done something wrong. "Get up," he slurred, waving me off. "That's my seat. I'm his real dad, not you." I kept my cool and tried to stay calm. "There are plenty of seats at the next table with the other guests. Why don't you join them?" I suggested. But he wasn't having it. "No," he snapped, with a growl in his voice. "This is my place. You need to leave my place. Who do you think you are?" I glanced over at Melissa, hoping she'd step in and help out, but she just sat there, staring at her hands like they held all the answers. I took a deep breath, determined not to let this ruin Ethan's big night. "Let me be clear," I said, locking eyes with Kevin. "You've got two choices: sit with the other guests or have security show you the door." His face twisted with anger. "Oh, listen to you, Mr. Moneybags, throwing your weight around," he sneered, trying to steady himself on the table's edge. "You think you can buy everything, don't you? Buy my son, my family's love." People were starting to notice, and some of my regulars were casting sideways glances while pretending not to care. My staff hovered nearby, waiting for my cue. "You just waltz in here with your fancy bar, your big house," Kevin spat, his voice rising with every word. "You think you can replace me just because you've got money? Well, guess what? You can't buy family with that." Before anyone could react, he chucked a plate off the table, sending cheese and meats crashing onto the floor. A bottle of sparkling water toppled over, spilling across the bar. I nodded to my security team, and they moved in like pros. "Sir, it's time for you to leave," the head of security said, taking Kevin's arm. I watched as they escorted him out, his slurred protests fading into the night. Silence settled back over the place, then chatter gradually picked up again. I stood up with a cheerful grin. "Really sorry about that, everyone. Drinks are on the house." The regulars weren't fazed and quickly went back to their conversations. But at our table, Ethan's friends and family were abuzz, whispering and sneaking glances at Ethan, Melissa, and me. I knew the gossip would be all over social media by morning. Ethan sat there stiffly, pushing food around on his plate. The sharp suit that made him look so grown up earlier now seemed to engulf him, making him look small and lost. His dream of an Instagram perfect party had turned into a nightmare. Eventually, he muttered something about having a headache and wanting to go home, so the party wrapped up. As people left, I heard them murmuring about poor Ethan and the scene with his dad. Once we got home, Ethan headed straight to his room. I followed the girls upstairs, then went to check on him, trying to think of something to say. The next morning, after the party disaster, Ethan showed up for breakfast looking exhausted. "How you feeling, buddy?" I asked gently. "Fine," he mumbled into his cereal, and that was that. One-word answers became the norm for the days that followed. It was like living in a ghost house. Ethan, usually full of energy and chatter, turned into a stranger. Anytime I walked in on him talking with Melissa, he'd instantly clam up. One night after Ethan went to bed, I tried talking to Melissa about it. "Don't you think we should do something? Maybe get him to talk to someone?" I asked. She just waved it off. "He's fine. He's just processing. Give him space." But it wasn't fine. None of it was. Despite the tension at home, we all went to Ethan's graduation. Melissa and I sat in the audience, clapping like crazy when his name was called. He looked great in his cap and gown, and for a moment, I thought I caught him glancing our way. I smiled, thinking maybe things were finally looking up. Naturally, we threw a party at the house later. I went all out with his favorite goodies: truffle fries, steak sliders, those little crab cakes he always snatched from the back of the kitchen, and the crazy 3-tiered chocolate cake that seemed like it should have taken a week to make right. His classmates came over, filling the house with laughter and excited chatter about college plans and summer trips. For a few hours, it felt like life was almost normal again. Ethan was chatting away and looked like himself again. I started to relax, thinking maybe we'd turned a corner. Then his phone rang. Ethan slipped out to take the call, and when he came back, something had changed. He seemed different, determined. For the first time in days, he willingly came up to me. "My dad's coming over," he announced. "He wants to congratulate me on graduating." My heart sank instantly. "Absolutely not," I shot back without skipping a beat, the ugly memory of his birthday disaster still fresh in my head. "Ethan, remember what happened at your birthday? He showed up drunk, caused a scene, and wrecked stuff." Ethan cut me off, his voice rising. "That was your fault. None of that would have happened if you just moved and let him sit down. He's my real dad. You should have stepped aside." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. After days of silence, this was what he thought? That it was my fault? I looked over to Melissa, hoping she'd finally step in and be the mom Ethan needed. "Melissa, please," I pleaded, "tell him how wrong his dad was at the birthday party." But she just stared at her hands, like they held all the answers. The same silence, the same avoidance I'd seen before. Something inside me snapped. 5 years of trying to be the perfect stepdad, walking on eggshells, making excuses for everyone. It all came rushing out. "Listen to me, Ethan," I said, steady but determined. "That was my wine bar. I planned that entire party for you. I bought that expensive suit you wanted. I did everything to make that night special. Your dad? He showed up drunk, embarrassed you, and caused damage. He didn't even bring you a present. He just brought chaos and humiliation." Ethan's face went from angry to absolutely livid in a flash. "Oh my God, here we go again," he shouted, throwing up his hands. "It's all about the money with you, isn't it? Bought this, paid for that. You think money lets you control everything." He spun around to his friends, who were awkwardly standing in the living room. "My real dad will be here soon," he laughed bitterly. "Finally, a normal person instead of this, gesturing at me like I was trash." "Your father is not coming into this house," I tried to say, keeping my cool despite the anger and hurt welling up inside me. "Not after what happened at the bar." That's when Ethan completely lost it. His face turned red, and he started yelling at me in front of everyone. "You're not my dad," he shrieked. "You're nothing to me. Who do you think you are to tell me what to do? Stay out of my life. You're just some guy my mom married for his money." The room fell silent. His friends looked uncomfortable, some checking their phones, others suddenly fascinated with the ceiling. Ethan turned back to them, voice dripping with venom. "Let's get out of here. I don't want to celebrate in his house anyway," emphasizing his like it was something dirty. His friends quickly left, avoiding eye contact. The front door slammed so hard the windows shook. I stood there alone in my own home, surrounded by uneaten food and scattered plates, feeling like I'd been hit by a freight train. This had to be it. Surely, after all this, Melissa would finally say something, stick up for me. "Melissa?" I urged. She cleared her throat, her voice cold and detached. "You had no right to throw the house and money in his face like that," she said flatly. "You didn't need to remind him this is your house, that your money pays for everything." That was low. I stared at her, seeing her in a way I hadn't before. "You've got to be kidding me," I said. "Where were you when your ex was throwing plates across my wine bar? Where were you just now when your son stood up in front of his entire graduating class?" So there I was in class, and suddenly Melissa started hurling all kinds of insults at me. I was pretty shocked, but she just shook her head, like I was the one who'd lost it. "You're the adult here," she snapped. "You should know better than to argue with a teenager." I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. "And you should know better than to ignore problems like they'll just go away," I shot back. "But that's your thing, right? You just sit there quietly while your ex-husband and son treat me like dirt. Well, guess what? I'm done being everyone's punching bag." Melissa's face turned stormy, and she clammed up, heading upstairs. A few minutes later, I heard the guest room door slam shut. The next morning at breakfast, it felt like someone had died. Melissa was across from me, pushing her scrambled eggs around without actually eating them, obviously trying to avoid looking at me. I was about to get up and leave when Ethan staggered into the kitchen, still in his clothes from the night before. The smell of alcohol reached me before he even made it to the table. I glanced at Melissa, hoping she'd say something, anything, about her teenage son coming home at 9 a.m. smelling like a liquor store. But like always, she just stared at her plate. "Where were you all night?" I asked him, trying to sound neutral. Ethan turned his bloodshot eyes on me, full of disdain. "None of your business," he sneered. "You're not my dad. You're just some random guy taking up space in this house." Then he turned and stumbled back upstairs. Melissa just sat there in silence again, and by this point, I was seriously starting to think her superpower was saying nothing in the face of chaos. The next week was like living in a house with a very cranky ghost. Ethan wouldn't even talk to me directly, he'd act like I wasn't there. "Mom," he'd say to Melissa, pointing at me like I was a sofa, "can you ask your husband to pass the salt?" Or he'd walk into a room and say, "This guy is in my way," and just stand there waiting for me to move. I kept quiet, reminding myself that I'd spent 5 years trying to be the perfect stepdad, and now I was just done with it. Let them show their true colors, and boy, did they ever. On Sunday, Melissa and I were sitting down to yet another awkward, silent dinner when Ethan burst into the dining room waving an envelope like he'd won the lottery. "Dad, I got in," he shouted, practically jumping up and down. "NYU accepted me. My dream school." I watched him run to Melissa, hugging her tightly, both of them grinning like crazy. Then Ethan turned to her with this unforgettable smirk and said, "Tell your husband he needs to pay for my tuition." Something inside me just snapped. I smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. It was the kind of smile you give when you're completely over it. "I won't be paying for your college," I said clearly. "You've made it very clear I'm not your dad. I'm a nobody, remember? Well, this nobody's wallet is staying closed. Why don't you ask your real dad to cover college?" Ethan's face went beet red. "You vindictive piece of," he started, tears filling his eyes, but I felt nothing. "You're just doing this to punish me. You're evil." I stood there, strangely calm, letting his insults wash over me like I was watching a storm through a window. "Mom," Ethan whirled on Melissa, "make him pay. He has to pay." Melissa cleared her throat, slipping into that patronizing tone I loathed. "Come on, honey, quit joking around," she said to me. "You know you need to pay for Ethan's education." I pushed my chair back and stood up. I've made myself perfectly clear. I'm not shelling out tens of thousands for someone who's spent weeks telling me I'm nothing to him, who acts like I don't exist in my own home. Then I turned and left the dining room, Ethan's screams following me up the stairs. I could hear him throwing another epic tantrum, plates crashing, chairs scraping, the whole dramatic show. Like father, like son, I thought grimly. I sat in my room, listening as the chaos slowly faded. But I knew it wasn't over. Melissa would be up soon, ready to continue the family drama. And sure enough, about half an hour later, she barged in, red-faced and furious. "I'm sick of it," she spat. "Sick of you and your games. You need to grow up and pay for Ethan's education." I looked at her calmly from where I sat on the bed. "No," I said. "You and your ex can figure out how to pay for NYU. Between the two of you, I'm sure you can come up with something." Melissa's jaw tightened, and she started pacing the room like a frustrated tiger. "You're being completely selfish. He's just a teenager, for God's sake. Adulting can be tough, right?" I remember watching her, slinging that old be the bigger person line at me. "Let it go, Robert," she'd say. "He's just a kid," she'd argue, always with some excuse. I'd just smile, nod, and open my wallet while they treated me like dirt. Taking a deep breath, I sighed. "A teenager who should know better," I murmured. This kid had made his feelings about me perfectly clear, so why should I bother investing in his future if all I got was contempt? Melissa stopped pacing and eyed me coldly. "Fine, I'll make it simple," she snapped. "Pay for Ethan's education or I'm filing for divorce." Clearly, she expected me to fall apart, to beg her not to leave. But I just shrugged. "All right, let's get divorced," I replied. Her face was a mix of shock and confusion, like she wasn't ready for me to call her bluff. "I'll call my lawyer first thing tomorrow," I said, standing firm. "Meanwhile, you and Ethan can find a new place to live." Melissa didn't say a word, just walked out, closing the door quietly behind her. The next morning, I came downstairs to a scene that felt like an ambush. Ethan, red-eyed, was sitting at the table. Melissa wore that fake concerned look. "Honey," she started, flashing that manipulative smile I hadn't noticed before. "We've all calmed down and thought about things." Ethan nodded like a puppet, chiming in, "Yeah, we just overreacted." Standing there, I suddenly saw them for who they really were. Melissa went on with her reasonable tone, saying, "Families fight, but they also make up. Since you escalated this college thing, it would mean a lot if you took the first step to reconcile." Ethan added on cue, "Yeah, paying tuition would show you're sorry and want to make things right." I almost laughed. Did they really think I was that easy to fool? "Actually," I said, holding up my phone, "I just talked to my lawyer. The divorce papers will be ready this afternoon." Their faces dropped. Ethan's fake smile vanished, and Melissa's face turned red with anger. Turning to Ethan, I said flatly, "Congrats. Now you won't have to deal with me interfering in your life." Ethan burst into real tears this time, but I was done being played. Melissa jumped up so fast her chair almost tipped over, then stormed upstairs. I heard them packing, doors slamming. No more fake apologies, just silence filled with suitcases being filled. I thought it was over, but I was wrong. The messages started that night, Melissa trying to talk like adults, Ethan saying sorry but still complaining about college. When I stayed silent, the messages got nastier. "You're being obstructive. Enjoy being alone with your money. You'll regret it later." I still said nothing. The divorce was quick, thanks to a good lawyer. Melissa got nothing from me, not a dime of my savings or wine bar profits. I hear things about them now and then, living in a small apartment, Ethan works at a mall, and Melissa's struggling with her career. I've since redecorated, tossed out everything that reminded me of them. The place feels bigger now, lighter even. Or maybe that's just me, finally free of trying to buy love from people who only cared about what they could get. Thanks for tuning in. If you haven't yet, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more crazy real life stories happening around you.